Want to expand the reach of your content? Start a podcast. Feature industry experts on your show and leverage the influence and reach of your guests to grow your brand. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Aurelien Mottier, CEO and co-founder at Operatix. His friends call him Ray, and we've known Ray for a little bit in producing their podcast over at Operatix, the B2B Revenue Acceleration podcast. Ray, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing very good today. Thank you very much for having me, Logan.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I get a lot of value from the sales leaders that you're having on your show regularly, and you're so passionate about everything sales and marketing. So excited to have you on B2B Growth to share your learnings with listeners today. We're going to be talking about some shifts in the market, some things that you can do as you go into new markets and adapt to some new ways that are affecting buying cycles and therefore the way that sellers should engage. But before we get into all of that, Ray, I would love for you to share with listeners who don't know you as well as myself and the Sweetfish team what your background is and a little bit about what you and the team at Operatix are up to these days.
Sure. So Operatix is a company that I co-founded 7.5 years ago. Prior to that, we had a company called Optima Consulting Partners that started in 2001. We always come from a background of helping IT technology companies, B2B software companies mostly, in achieving three things in the market: increasing their average deal value, shortening their sales cycles, and closing more business. That's really what we work for all of our clients. Now that we're Operatix, we have three main, what I would call families of services within the business, or family of services within the business. The first one is around the enterprise market. So enterprise market is typically for a sales cycle that will be relatively long and complex. So usually, minimum 3, 6, 9, 12, but potentially even 18 months sales cycles. Average deal value around anywhere between $80,000 plus, where typically we will be involved in a multi-buyer, a multi-persona. There is lots of people to get involved in the decision-making process, if you will. And what we offer to our clients there is what we call ourselves an account-based everything approach, which is a mix between account-based marketing and account-based selling. Then the second family of services is around the mid-market, where usually we would have clients that would have an average deal value anywhere between $5,000 to $50,000, $60,000. Potentially a commodity product, and what they would need us to support them with a technology stack where we can go through a large volume of data and boil it down to the essence of people who have shown interest. And then we will use the human element, which is the expensive part of the process, to do the qualification, the distribution, and the reporting on those opportunities. And finally, the last thing that we do at Operatix is around the channel. As you may know, it's quite common for an IT software company to use a channel, and that channel could be a 1-tier or 2-tier, so distribution and then resellers. But the bottom line is that we help our clients to accelerate the recruitment of new channel partners. We help them to do the enablement of those partners from a sales and marketing perspective. But we also help them to do what we call the activations of those partners. And basically what it means that we are plugging our lead generation services, our pipeline generation services, our revenue generation services at the back of the channel to support the channel in fulfilling opportunities. So we basically give them opportunities so they can see some value and then eventually start investing on behalf of our clients to make them successful, as you mentioned, in a specific territory or on a specific vertical.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I know of a lot of tech companies right now that are trying to leverage both of those channels, the direct and the indirect, through channel partners or resellers. And oftentimes that beginning stages of trying to develop that channel are not very accelerated, to borrow one of your words there. So love the way that you guys are keying in on that problem and helping tech companies in that way, because there are different challenges, right, to direct and indirect sales through those different methodologies. So a few things we're going to talk about today, Ray, really apply across both of those as you're trying to generate demand and build your outbound model. One of the things I know that you're very passionate about is that generic messaging just doesn't work anymore. The spray and pray and just volume approach without some balance to it is hitting a diminishing return sooner and sooner. And you touched on this with your mention of account-based everything, which I love that term as well. Tell us a little bit about some of the shifts you've seen in B2B sales in your career that have really kind of informed that perspective for you.
Sure. Well, first of all, you know me well. I'm extremely passionate about that topic. So I'm glad you pick on that. I mean, if I was to make a statement, my statement would be that telemarketing is dead. Unfortunately, we come from a background of being associated with telemarketing. And telemarketing back in the 80s was, you have an Excel spreadsheet, or you've got a list of contacts, you've got a phone, and you call every single person, and you've got something called a script. And that script is you speaking about you. So it's a me. I am the best. I was the pioneer. I have done that. We do that, etc., etc. This is great, but unfortunately, it's not working anymore. The buyers have evolved. They've evolved because of internet. They've evolved because you've got consultants. You've got great companies like Gartner, IDC, coming into the market. And also, the market is getting more crowded. So when you used to call someone to sell them a solution that was pretty unique, pretty cool back then, now you've got 20 vendors fighting for the same budget. So you need to be smart. And we believe in one methodology called the challenger sell, the challenger marketing. So it's a whole mindset where at the end of the day, and it's actually, I've got to say it again, we are shocking some of our clients when we say that. But when we kick off a program with the clients, we actually tell them, we do not care about your technology. We don't care about what you do. What we care about the people you are selling to. We care about their context. We care about what do they do without you? How do they survive? How is their day-to-day job operating without your solution? Okay. And then obviously it's a question of assessing the pain. So it's a little bit like if you've got a pain in your back. You've got a pain in your back, and if you just went to the gym, you just say, you know what, it's a normal pain, so I will live with it for a few days and it will go off. And you need to wait and you need to assess if that pain is big enough. And when that pain is big enough, you become a must-have. And when you become a must-have is when you should engage with that prospect. But at the end of the day, that's really the value that we are trying to assess. So coming back to my statement, telemarketing is dead. We do believe, and we are massive advocates, and hence the passion around that. It's about research. It's about understanding your persona, the buying persona. It's about understanding your prospect. Nobody cares about a solution. If you've got a solution that only solves the problem of one person, you will never scale. So this is not good enough. What you've got to do is to understand your persona and being able to translate your value proposition in the context of that individual. Now, again, things have changed. So when you used to sell an IT solution to one person because you had an IT director and I was the only person dealing with IT, now IT is becoming more and more complex. So you'll have, in the Fortune 1000, you'll have companies who may have over a few hundreds people in their IT departments, okay? People are segmented, there is function. So now you've got another layer of complexity, and that layer of complexity is then to adapt and tailor your message to different personas within that account. And by persona, I mean different function, different job title, people who are basically involved in the decision-making process, either from a budget perspective, from a championship perspective, or from a technical perspective. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are at with, our statement of telemarketing is dead and now you've got to change. It's not about you. It's not about how cool your company is. It's about your end user. So go and adapt them.
Yeah, kudos to you guys for taking that stance with a lot of your customers, even if it takes them aback a little bit, and making that statement of, we don't care about your solution. Because one of the things you and I have talked about before is that, especially when you're selling disruptive technology, you have to approach buyers differently. But one of the things that early stage companies or fast growth companies, the founders are still kind of involved in the messaging and the selling really in the early days. They get so excited about their solution because they've come up with something great. And while that may be the case, that focus can really hinder you, because then you lose sight of the problem that you solve and the consistent symptoms that you need to be picking up on, as you talked about, the Sandler pain funnel and looking at selling as kind of being that prescriptive doctor that's asking a lot of questions about the pain before you make that prescription. But then there's also these other factors you have to think about, in that if it's disruptive technology, they may not already have budget for it. They may not know how to buy it. They may not know who needs to be involved. What are some of your recommendations for companies specifically that are, bringing something new to market or something disruptive that they need to be thinking about in how those buyers are going to go through that journey and assess some sort of disruptive technology?
Yeah. Well, you're spot on. Just a quick anecdote before I get started to answer your question on the people developing cool technology. I was in a kickoff recently with a great company. They are a great company. They've got a great value proposition, and I think they will be doing very, very well in the market. And funnily enough, we were kicking off and they went through their presentation. And at the end of the presentation, we just looked at them and said, hey, why do you need us? And basically, your presentation tells us how great you are, how fantastic your product are. Why do you need us? It seems that you're absolutely perfect, guys. And unfortunately, what you need to be honest with prospect. So coming back to the point that I was making earlier on, there is a lots of people who just tell you how great they are. And it's not the most pertinent approach. So one of the things that you've got to do is to be honest about the value that you are bringing. And if that value is just around 1 point, you need to go to the bottom of that. And you've got to say something along the line, look, so I'm going to cut the weed. I'm going to cut to the core. You are a very busy person. This is what makes us different. Yes, we've got competitors. Yes, you've got a way to go about it, but this is what makes us different. And that's how you get to the first phase, which is the acquisition. So now if I want to answer your question of the disruptive vendors, and again, this is something that gets me excited because we love disruptive vendors. This is the one that we are looking for. I want my sales team to find me the next disruptive vendors because they are the great success story. You work with one, everybody look at them. The fact that you work with them is the advocate of how good you are as a company. So we want them, we embrace them. Now, the thing with disruptive vendors is that you need to go through a 2-step process, we believe. A first step, which is the acquisition. So you want to get into the accounts, you want to go through that door, you want to have that first level of conversation. And that's all good. That conversation, from our perspective, this is not true in all cases, but probably in, I'd say 80 to 90% of the case is probably right. You need to start at the most senior level you can, at the authority level, okay? So when you've got that, you've got the door open and you can create the excitement within the account. You can create the sort of buzz. Now, this is just the beginning of your job. As you mentioned, when you sell something completely new, people won't have a budget for it. You are not a commodity. There is not a line of budget open for it. So then the next thing that you need to do is to appreciate that company will make what I call a consensus. And that consensus, if I was to picture it, it's about having a few people around the table making a decision together, okay? And making a decision to go or not with a vendor. So to illustrate that, I will take one example. We helped a company that I won't mention to come into the European market, okay? So they were a US company doing pretty well in the US and they just opened up in the UK. Now, in the first 9 months of operation with them, we generated $59.8 million of pipeline, okay? Which is a tremendous result. We were extremely happy with that. Unfortunately, those deals got what we call quiet. you had prospect not responding to their sales manager, and the deals were not progressing in the pipeline. And what we realized that we've done a fantastic job at doing the acquisition and creating the demand. Unfortunately, you had a bunch of people underneath those high-level authority, C-level decision makers that were almost putting a veto in progressing the conversation, okay? Because that was touching their kind of their part of their responsibility, if you will. So what we had to do, we had to go through a cycle that we call the deep dive. And the deep dive means that we work with our clients in identifying in some cases, we can go up to 15, 20 other personas that we should target within a specific account in order to accelerate the pipeline. So what we would do, we would change the call to action. We would, if you speak to a technical person, you may not want to send your CEO for a 1 hour conversation face to face with them. However, you could get one of your pre-sales to have a 15, 20 minutes technical presentation about the benefits that you will deliver to that individual. And that's what we need to do. That's what we see our clients requiring when they are disruptive. You've got two phases. So to summarize, you've got the acquisition phase, which is, okay, let's go into that account and let's parachute your sales guys as high as possible within that organization to create the demand. When that demand is created and you've got a door open, don't expect that person to be your sales guy. That prospect, that end user won't go and motivate their team to make a decision around you unless you're extremely lucky. So your sales guy and your marketing guy should go back into the account, identify those 5 to 10 to 20 people that you need to engage with. So just the day they were going to get together around the table and they say, hey, are we moving with that vendor? Everybody say yes. And they will say yes because they understand that you, as a vendor, what is the value that you can deliver for every single one of these individuals in their context, in their language. And that's what we do. That's what we try to push into the market.
I love what you're talking about there, Ray, because, we talked a little bit earlier about how you need to become very targeted with an account-based everything approach on the first stage as you identify the characteristics of your ideal customer profile and your primary buyer persona. And then you need to segment those. So if you serve people in financial services or manufacturing or those different vertical markets, then you need to segment those and you need to tailor your messaging accordingly. But the segmentation and the tailoring of the message doesn't stop there. As you point out there, several points of research have indicated, 6 to 8 or whatever the number is now, this buying by committee, number of people involved in a B2B purchase is continuing to grow. And so you can't just say, okay, well, we need to get to those 6 people, so we're going to hit them all with the same message. You need to segment now at that next level in the deep dive phase, as you talk about it, because the value is going to be different. If you've got 4 different people from IT at different levels, they're going to have different value to them. And then if there are decision makers in finance and marketing as well, then you need to tailor that messaging. So what I hear you saying is that segmentation doesn't just stop when you identify your target accounts from the engagement level. Is that right?
That's right. You should never stop segmenting. And you are learning as you go, because let's not forget that most of those disruptive vendors we work with have never really scaled before. They are using us for scaling. So we are the guinea pigs of scaling. Okay. Those guys may have had some investors, and their investors will put them in front of people. They will get a few first deals going on, etc., etc. But actually going to market and actually, Logan, we've got, I'd say we probably have around not too far away from a third of our clients. I'll put a 30% out there, but 30% of our clients are Series A/Series B vendors. They are people who just got a product, just going to market and trying to figure things out. If I was to give you an example of our most extreme case, we work with a vendor that was in between risk management, call center, security, and infrastructure. So touching the network, touching the call centers, touching risk, and working for a large financial institution. In that case, we started with the postulate that, doing our first segmentation, we probably would have 5 people we should talk to. Eventually, those guys, after I think it was after 19 months, they closed a major deal with a major financial institution in North America for $13 million. So it's a very large deal. And when we did the math, we had 62 unique conversations. So 62 unique individuals that we had to work with them in targeting within that specific accounts to get that deal through the door. Okay. So, the segmentation is often something that you do on a whiteboard. Now, every single account is different and you need to keep on segmenting. You need to keep on working and understanding your accounts. Now, obviously, what you try to do as an account-based approach is to try to find a way where you can do some one-to-few. So not reinventing the wheel every single time. So then what you can do is to have a segmentation that we will call matricial. Okay. And in order to scale, what we try to do is to support our clients in having a matricial setup where they can say, okay, that's a financial institution, or that's a pharmaceutical company, or that's a manufacturing company. And that's their challenges. As an organization, this is the challenge that we think they've got in their business. And then we will look at the different individual, the person as I described earlier on within that account. So you may have someone in finance, you may have someone in IT, you may have someone in a line of business. It's about understanding their challenges. Fortunately enough, the challenges are often quite close from one company to another. So once you got that secret code and you go through lifting the weights, pushing that stone, pushing that big stone uphill for the first time, then after you can replicate those efforts. But it takes time to make that segmentation. And I guess segmentation is about also listening to the voice of the customer. So again, what you can do on a whiteboard may be at 70% correct, but then you need to listen to your prospect, learn from this conversation, get that glue between sales and marketing to talk together, discuss with each other, exchange information so they can evolve the approach, and make things greater by, again, it's about scaling. It's not about just doing once. You do it once, that's great. But if you've got to do it once, you've got to start from scratch again. What have you achieved? Our clients want to scale. So segmentation, in a way, never stops.
Mm-hmm. I love that, Ray. And you make a very good point about, the balance there of becoming very personalized, but finding those things that you can repeat that are scalable and looking for those patterns. I could continue this conversation with you all day, Ray. You have a lot of passion, as we said from the top, about, the way that sales teams go to market, the way that they accelerate pipeline these days. So if listeners would like to continue the conversation with you, stay connected, reach out, what's the best way for them to stay in touch with you, Ray?
Well, there is a few. If they can spell my full name, they can find me on LinkedIn. So as you touched on, I've had the chance to be born in France, and my parents gave me a very French name, but I go by the name of Aurelien Mottier, which is Aurelien, and my surname is Mottier. So, you can find me on LinkedIn. The name of the company is Operatix. So I would hope that at some point I would come through in the search results if you type Operatix, which is Operatix. As you mentioned, we also work very closely with your team, Logan, and we've got the B2B Revenue Acceleration podcast, which by the way, we absolutely love. That was a concept that I was a little bit adverse in doing at first, but got convinced by my team and actually take a great enjoyment in doing now because I'm meeting so many great people. It's unbelievable. But you can find us on iTunes as B2B Revenue Acceleration podcast. And finally, if you want to email me, I'm at Aurelien@operatix.net. So that's probably the best way to get in touch.
Perfect. Ray, we will definitely make it easy for folks. If people have any issues spelling your name, they can just check out the show notes, and your LinkedIn profile will be right there. We'll also link to your podcast for folks in sales and marketing listening to this, which I know is a lot of our listeners. I know that they'll get value out of your conversations with sales and marketing leaders over on the B2B Revenue Acceleration podcast as well. Ray, this is always great. Love talking with you and your team, and appreciate your passion and some of the anecdotes that you shared that I think are going to be very valuable for listeners today.
Thank you very much for having me, Logan. It was a real pleasure today.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3. a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.